Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight's live town hall meeting hosted by Douglas County. We'd like to welcome all of you who showed up in person. We've actually got a really good crowd tonight. And of course, the hundreds of you joining already online and on the phone. Tonight's live town hall topic is based on what we are hearing from you, our citizens. During the pandemic, we all started working from home. But where's the line between working at your home, running your business at your home, as opposed to running a business from your home? Based on your feedback, the Board of County Commissioners is considering changes to our zoning regulations to allow more uses for home-based businesses. In November 2021, we host our first live town hall on this topic to take the community's pulse. Tonight, we're talking about the specific ideas that have come out of that event and several follow-up community discussions during work sessions. We'll give you an overview of those proposed changes and take your feedback with 4 polling questions. After tonight's live town hall, a more detailed survey will be posted on our website at douglas.co.us. So please stay on the line. We'll get to your questions and your feedback. First, Commissioner Thomas will tell you a bit about the format for tonight's call.
Thank you, Commissioner Teal. Good evening, everyone. So tonight we're here talking about a potential change to zoning regulations that would allow for expanded uses of residential properties for business. For context, we want people on tonight's call to know who would be impacted. The proposed changes are for Douglas County citizens living in unincorporated Douglas County on more than 4.5 acres that is zoned for agriculture or rural development. This section of the zoning code and any changes to it do not apply to residents living in a municipality or a planned development like Stonegate or Highlands Ranch. We want tonight's conversation to be very interactive. So if you would like to ask a question, press *3 on your telephone keypad and you will be transferred to an operator who will take down some basic information. Once the operator notes your information, you will be returned to the call and can listen to the conversation until it's your turn to ask your question. So remember, press *3 on your telephone keypad to ask a question or provide a comment. Please stay with us. We want your feedback, and there will be several ways to provide it. Roger?
All right, thank you, Commissioners. Again, as a reminder, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. You'll be transferred to an operator who will take down some quick information. Once they note that information, you'll be returned to the call and can listen to the conversation until it's your turn. Since we do want to hear from as many folks as possible, we'll ask you to limit yourself to 1 question, and I'll call out your name when it's your turn and ask you to repeat the question for our live audience. As the Commissioners noted, you can also participate online by visiting douglas.co.us/town hall, and we'll also be taking some questions from the live audience here with us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Teal. I believe you have an online question to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. First question that came in earlier online comes from Sarah. She asks, what section of the county zoning code are we talking about? What does it say now, and what are the proposed changes? And well, we have Michael Carey, our zoning compliance manager, and we have Dan Dirts from planning. And so, Michael, can you go ahead and take us into the current regulations, and then maybe, Dan, you can take us through the changes proposed.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Teal. Since we are talking about home occupations on properties that are zoned rural residential, large rural residential, or agricultural 1, and 4.5 acres larger, we'll concentrate on the Class 2 home occupation regulations tonight. Although Class 1 and Class 2 are both allowed in these zone districts, Class 2 are the ones that are a little bit more intense. So with that being said, the Class 2 home occupation regulations currently that are in place require a permit in order to have a Class 2 home occupation. You can use up to 50% of the first floor area of your home for that home occupation. So let's say you have a 1,000 square foot ranch home, you'd be able to devote 500 square feet of your home, anywhere in the home, to that home occupation. With that, you may also use a detached structure, and you can use up to 1,500 square feet of that detached structure for that home occupation. You may have up to 2 non-resident employees that come to the property to work at that home occupation. One big distinction of the current regulations that are in place right now versus what is proposed is that currently you have to actually conduct that home occupation at that home versus what's being proposed would allow for someone to operate their business from that property. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan to what's proposed.
Thank you, Michael. With that said, the differential between at and from, again, that adds some flexibility to these regulations. So with these proposed changes, there are some changes that have to do with the size of or the allowance of the Class 2 home occupation. The square footage will increase with these proposed changes. There is also a change that's being proposed as to the weight of a vehicle that can travel along the roads. And currently, there is no regulations as to that weight of the vehicle. So by allowing some more flexibility with the proposed changes, there are some parameters that we felt that we did need to include in these changes to help us be able to regulate those things.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan. Roger, did I see that we have an caller on the phone?
Do indeed. Michael, you are live. Go ahead with your question.
Go ahead, Michael. We are waiting for your question, sir.
Yes, I was wondering about the unincorporated areas with acreages around 5 and 10 acres where people are starting businesses, running, where they're bringing traffic into the areas, whether it be secondhand businesses, agricultural, flower-type businesses, training programs that have never been in these areas before. They're starting to impact the surrounding areas. Do the new ordinances or the new changes affect that, or will that preclude parking lots and storage areas and those type of businesses from prevailing?
I can take that. So currently with our Class 2 home occupation regs and with what is proposed, you are prohibited from having outdoor storage associated with that home occupation. So you wouldn't be able to have an outdoor storage yard of a bunch of equipment or vehicles or that type of thing. The vehicle that you use for transportation to and from work, you'd be able to keep that outdoors because that's your transportation. But all the additional equipment, stuff that you might need in the business, would not be able to be stored outdoors. It would have to be stored within that 3,000 square foot limitation that's proposed in the regulations now.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for that question. And ma'am, we'll get to you in just a second. But first, I heard, Roger, you have an online question that came in.
We sure do. Greg asked, so if we are not on greater than 4.5 acres, these changes will not impact us. Is that correct?
And that is correct. And, you know, I leave it to Michael or Dan to correct me, but yeah, that is correct. Will not apply to rural residential areas under 4.5 acres.
So I believe you had your hand up, ma'am?
Yes, hi.
Wait, just a sec.
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. Do you want to hold it or? Okay. My name is Elisa. I am in rural residential Homestead Hills. And we're aware of some transgressions already in a rural residential neighborhood. And so my question is about enforcement. And is the county prepared to put the personnel on this that can see that not only the old regs are followed, but the new ones as well? Thank you.
Well, Michael, that kind of falls square into your operation. Would you like to speak to that, please?
Sure. We have currently 3 zoning compliance officials that do enforce the zoning regulations. We enforce those regulations based on receiving complaints from the public. We do not drive around openly looking for violations. So we wait for the public to actually report those to us. With Class 2 home occupations, if they have been issued a permit, we do actually go out annually to inspect the facility to make sure that they are complying with the permit that's been issued and with their application and what it is that they indicated they were going to be doing.
I have another hand up back here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I am not in rural residential, but I am in an area that accesses rural residential. My house has roads with no streetlights, no sidewalks, no curbs. So I will be involved, and I will be. It will be negative on my property and properties around me for people to drive up my road in order to get to the rural residential areas. So what is the plan for that?
Can you tell us what road you're on?
Yeah, I'm on Surrey, and I'm in Surrey Ridge, and Surrey Ridge Estates is rural residential.
Well, I'll go ahead and address a little bit of that right now. As has been discussed, you have people who are in rural residential right now. So, ma'am, your neighbors who drive through your neighborhood in order to get to their homes. If they're running a business from that home right now with 2 employees, you live with that situation right now. And so the definition here is that, well, I see head shaking around the room. I guess then I have to understand. You folks, giant trucks are allowed on the neighborhoods right now. Okay, hang on. You guys have a chance. You guys have the opportunity to be heard. And ma'am, obviously you're all fired up here in front. You're going to be next in line, and that's okay. But we'd rather get you guys on the microphone to ask your questions so that the folks that are joining us online and on the phone can hear it as well. So I still maintain that right now the condition exists for those giant trucks to be rolling through your neighborhood right now to access businesses that can operate legally right now with 2 employees on their properties. Commissioner Thomas, would you like to take it?
Well, I think that Roger is indicating it's time to go to the next segment. Roger, do you have something else next?
We do. It's time to ask our first survey question. It's easy to participate. All you have to do is use your telephone keypad to enter the number of your response. If you're participating online, just click your response, and those here in the audience, I believe, have paper ballots. Here's the question. Do you live in an area impacted by these proposed changes? That is unincorporated Douglas County on 4.5 acres of land or more and zoned for agricultural or rural development. Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no, and press 3 if you're not sure. We'll report the results after we take a few more questions. And I think next, Commissioner Teal has an online question for us. Go ahead.
All right. Roger, the question we got in from Mike, how is the zoning code enforced? And I think we kind of heard a little bit of that from Michael. Michael, is there anything you'd like to expand on what you had given us before?
Sure. I can let you know that the process is once we receive a complaint, we'll actually go out and try to make contact with the property owner to validate whether or not what's being reported to us is going on next door or not, or down the road. And our first step would be to educate the public as to what our regulations say, and we'll issue what's called a courtesy notice that basically lets them know, here's what our regulations say, here's what we believe you might be in violation in, and here's what you could do to correct that. If they don't correct that, then at that point we'll actually issue a notice of violation determining that the property is in violation. And from there, if they do not come into compliance, we've got different tools at our disposal to bring a site into compliance, mainly going to court. And we'll sit down with our attorney's office to decide which way to proceed.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Ma'am, I told you you were next up. Would you like to ask a question or make a statement? Please go ahead and stand up, please.
So you were really just talking about how cars are going through the neighborhood, right? And there's employees, but what you're not taking in.
Could you
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't really like public speak. I really don't like, even though I get fired up, I don't like public.
Actually, me neither, but
I don't like
there you go.
speaking, and I'm not very good at it. But but you were talking about the cars, right? And you're saying, well, there's cars going through now, but you're giving the right for everybody, for people applying for this home occupation permit to have huge trucks and park them outside. Huge trucks. We may live on acreage, but where most of us live, it's not as rural as you think. We're zoned that way, but the county has grown up around us, right?
Okay.
Right? So now you're setting it up so that in my beautiful house, I can have a dump truck or whatever it is parked in the driveway next to me. That's going to affect my home values. It's going to affect when I ride my horse in the backyard. It's going to affect a lot of things. On our particular neighborhood, we have narrow roads. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have lights. And it's just a hazard. And that's just one piece of why this is such a bad idea.
Okay, well, tell you what, can we hold up there? And let's take a look at that. And here up on the big screen, and I certainly hope we can get this for the folks that are joining online. And folks on the phone, we'll do our very best to be descriptive here. But notice what we're talking about here, and actually, ma'am, I really think your concern is highlighted right here, where we talk about what is allowed and what's not allowed. And Dan, I know you've done a whole lot of work on this to make sure we get this very clearly defined to address a concern just like your own, ma'am. Can you go ahead and give us more details here, Dan?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, certainly. The current regulations that we have in place do not have any requirements on the size of vehicles that can be used as part of this Class 2 home occupation. Under the proposed regulations, there would be a limit to 26,000 pounds for the primary vehicle. The 26,000 pounds vehicle is shown up here on this graphic, and really what we're looking at is any vehicle above that, and these are typical vehicles that you would find that are above that 26,000 pound limit, would not be permitted. The vehicles that you see here that are being shown on the screen currently would be all the type and size vehicles that you would be seeing under these current regulations, or under the proposed regulations. Again, under the current regulations, there is no requirement on any of this. In addition, if you're carrying a trailer, you would be allowed up to 40,000 pounds. So that is another thing that we are putting a regulation to, again, which we do not currently have under the current regulations.
Yes. I mean, and the important thing was to establish that, per your very comment, ma'am, having dump trucks sitting on the property right next to you. We're handling that. That is not going to be permitted. That will get caught for a violation by Mr. Carey and his team. Before I take another question in the room, it looks like we have hot online questions coming in online. Roger, you have an online question for us.
We do. Lenore asks, where can we locate this zoning section on the Douglas County website?
And so, Wendy, is that something that you can help us out with?
I can help with that. Thank you, Commissioner. Our Douglas County zoning resolution is located on the website, and we would very easily just go under our department, under community development. Zoning resolutions are found under that section there. Proposed changes, we have a web link under www.douglas.co.us/PRO, which stands for Project Records Online. The proposed regulations can be found there.
Roger, I understand you have a call. I'm sorry, Michael, did you have more to add?
I was just going to say, and then there's a new actual web page that went live today for home occupation specifically. So if you just go to douglas.co.us and go to the search function and just put in home occupation, that new search page will come up, and it's actually got a link to the zoning resolution there. Home occupations are specifically found under section 23 of the zoning resolution.
Roger, you have another call?
Well, let's hear from Kathy. Kathy, go ahead, you're live.
Hi. I feel like this is a little bit unrelated, but I wondered if this has anything to do with people who rent out their home or part of their home on Airbnb or a site like that.
Well, I'll tell you the intent of tonight was to not discuss that issue, but I want to turn it to the experts who deal with the code here in the county. Michael, can you address that?
I sure can. So I believe what you're referring to, ma'am, is what's generally known as short-term rentals. We're actually addressing that topic separately. Currently in Douglas County, there are very limited opportunities to do a short-term rental. It's on our larger zone district properties, and it's actually labeled as a bed and breakfast right now. We actually have to reside at the property to operate that type of use. But just generally speaking, renting out rooms or your entire home for short-term periods is currently not allowed in the county. But that is something that the county is looking at separately.
And the definition of short-term?
Less than 30 days.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
And we have another online question, Roger.
We do. I'll also mention that we have a telephone town hall on short-term rentals on May 26th, so stand by for that. It's a good opportunity to learn more information. We're going to go back to the phone and hear from Jim. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Jim. My question is, today I live in unincorporated Douglas County. I have 4.8 acres, and it's listed as agricultural, residential. What is the change to mine? I know you're talking about all this rezoning to allow home occupations. What happens to me? I'm already ag. I'm on 4.8. I'm unincorporated. I have animals.
Sure. So with your 4.8 acres being zoned agricultural, nothing will change with your zoning. With your zoning of A1, it requires a minimum lot size of 35 acres for the uses of an A1 property. So what happens is your uses have to drop down into what property zone district you fall. So in your 4.8 acre property, you would actually classify for the rural residential zone districts. So with this, you would still be able to allow a Class 2 home occupation permit from your property.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Hey,
Wait, whoa.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, one last, so do I lose my ag status if I'm not really going out and doing home occupation? Is the ag considered home occupation in a rural residential?
No, your ag status is actually based from the assessor's office on how you're using the property. So if you're currently being taxed with an agricultural classification, if that's how you're using your property, that would not change.
Okay, thank you, sir, for that two really good questions. Let's go ahead, folks, before we come back into the room, and let's go ahead and move on to our second polling question. Roger?
You bet. Let me first give the results of our first. We have 53% who answered this state are impacted by these proposed changes, and 42% who said they are not impacted. Here's our second question again. Use your telephone keypad to enter the number of your response or respond online. When it comes to a neighbor operating a business out of his or her home, which are you most concerned about? Press 1 for increased car traffic. Press 2 for truck traffic. Press 3 for parking. Press 4 for amount of space within the home the business occupies. Press 5 for the amount of space within an accessory structure, such as a barn or detached garage that the business occupies. Press 6 for all of the above, and press 7 for no concerns or none of the above. Again, we'll report the results in just a few minutes, and I now believe we're going to go back to an online question with Commissioner Thomas. Go ahead.
So the online question we have comes from Madison. How do my rights as a property owner play into these decisions? Shouldn't I be able to use my property as I like?
I think the answer to that is yes, actually. I think that, yeah, there is a degree of, you own the property, you have a right to use it the way you wish. Obviously, this is something that we've tried to address in our current zoning regulations. We're modifying them. And so we've made a decision beforehand as a community that, well, it's not unlimited. We've made a decision as a community that we do want to have some controls. I always call it the building a steel plant on your property. Even if it was okay because of property rights, it's probably not okay because of the disruption to your neighbors. So I think what we're doing today is trying to find that in between, that way to recognize property rights and yet still understand that we have a community that does want some controls in place.
So as I'm walking back to take a question, I'll just weigh in like Commissioner Teal did that. I think there's two sides to the coin on property rights. There's people who want to use their property how they want, and there's neighbors who bought a property with zoning in place and they want that to be recognized as well. So there's two sides to this. And Roger, which back here? Yes, ma'am.
Early on, we talked about big trucks and the like, and were kind of dismissed as, well, big trucks already come into the neighborhood. Of course they do, but they are not part of an ongoing business. They are for the needs of the homes that are there or to build homes on empty lots. That's an entirely different thing than an ongoing business whose trucks are going to come and go every day. We don't have the infrastructure for that. We do not. It's not safe.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
So I wonder, Dan, if you could help us address that, how we're dealing with the proposed changes. Can a company, can a homeowner decide to open a company and have unlimited trips with, as the young lady just said, any kind of vehicle?
The proposed changes limit the amount of trips to 8 one-way trips for the home occupation use. So under current regulations, we do not have a specific number of trips. Under the proposed regulations, it is limited to 8 one-way trips.
In a day?
That would be per day. Yes, that is per day.
And then it comes back again. And we have a question here.
I have a really easy question. I'd like to know how many Class 2 HO permits have been issued in the last year, the last 5 years, or the last 10 years.
Do any of you have that information?
I don't have that specific information. We would have to research that. Sure. It's not that many, no. But we can certainly research that for you.
So for those who didn't hear, it's not how many?
It's not 100.
In the last year or in the last 5 years?
In the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
So before we continue on with questions coming from the panel, questions for the panel from the hearing room, just want to remind everybody who's joining us on the phone or online, go ahead and press *3 on your keypad in order to get prompted to ask a question, and we'll be happy to take your question at that time. And Roger, do we have a phone question right now?
We sure do. Let's hear from Aaron, or Aram. I apologize if I mispronounced it.
Yeah, my name is Arun. Hi, everybody. So we were told that square feet will increase. So my concern is that will increase the property tax?
I have no intent at this time, based on consideration, to raise property tax. Commissioner Thomas, do you have a different answer to that question?
Well, we've decreased the taxes through credits the last few years, so the intent is not to increase the taxes, no.
All right. Look, Roger, did I see we have another online question that came in?
We do. This came in from Kathleen. Kathleen asks, who will be monitoring and regulating the traffic road stipulations of this change in regulation? We feel like this will not be monitored at all, and we do not want this rezoning in Surrey Ridge.
Michael, is that something you'd like to tackle?
Sure. Once again, we would have to wait for someone to report an issue of someone violating that regulation, or when we go out to actually do the annual review, we would have a conversation with them to find out, if they're still meeting that requirement of the 8 trips per day. But it's going to depend on, those in the neighborhood that would be affected and actually noticing, additional traffic next door that's going above and beyond that.
And so, Michael, essentially that is our current situation now as well, though.
Correct.
Okay. Hey, Roger, I think I'd like to take a couple of questions from the audience, if that's okay. Folks, I'm going to start over here with a gentleman who raised his hand just a few minutes ago. I'm going to go with this gentleman. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Hey, I just want to say I'm here to support the changes for the updates of the Class 2 home occupations, which would allow business owners to work from home, not at home, but both, and park equipment and trailers used for the business at their property. The current Class 2 home occupation criteria totally excludes contractors, tradesmen, craftsmen who leave their properties with equipment who do work at a customer site. I received a violation for this very reason. It just doesn't make sense. I appreciate the county's willingness to review current criteria to consider changing it. And I just want everybody to know there's a lot of supporters for this. So everybody who wants it, raise their hand. You look around, buddy.
Okay, thank you so much. It does look like we have some supporters, but it does look like we have some opponents. So we just heard, we heard prior from a couple folks who were against this. We just heard from a supporter of these changes. Do we have another supporter who'd like to ask a question? You're going to go to this young lady. Actually, I'm going to get this young man right here. Please stand up, sir.
Barely stand up. You did say vehicles had to be parked indoors when they're back. Is that correct? That's my question. Thank you.
No, if that is their transportation to and from work, that can be parked outside.
Okay.
It's the additional equipment stuff.
The additional equipment, like the tractor that has to go off the site, does that have to be indoors?
That would have to be indoors within that 3,000 square feet.
Okay.
Right.
And then does this supersede any HOA requirements?
No, it would be up to the HOA to enforce the covenants for that community.
For the HOA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that was something that we've been very mindful of and had many conversations of making sure that we are going ahead and not overriding HOAs, not overriding local covenants, and taking any power away from them. Before we get to more questions in the audience, we have our next polling question. Roger, next polling question, please.
We sure do. Here's the question. Let me pull it up. We asked, sorry, I was not quite there. We asked, here's the question again, use your telephone keypad to enter your number, the number of your response, or enter it online. Here's the question. If you would like to operate a business out of your home, what is currently standing in your way? Press 1 for need additional space within an accessory structure, such as a barn or detached garage. Press 2 if you need additional space inside the home. Press 3 if you need to be able to hire employees to work on site. And press 4 if you need to be able to utilize a truck or trailer. Again, enter your response, and we can take a question. Commissioner, while people are voting?
I'll go ahead. You want to go ahead and take it, Laura?
Sure, I'll take one. See a gentleman back here with his hand up.
I want to dovetail on something you just finished saying before we did the polling question, and that is that you don't want to override any covenants that are out there. Our covenants in our community and an adjoining community says the land use can only be used for residential. So, if someone comes in for a permit into your planning department and they want to utilize what you're proposing to pass, how are you going to regulate that? Is that planning department going to ask for the covenants, Or are they going to ask for a letter from the HOA? Or are they going to ask for a letter from an architectural control committee? What governance is going to happen at this level to ensure that no one is violating the covenant? Or are you putting it back into the hands of the residents to file lawsuits?
Dan, do you want to discuss that additional provision that was added to the regulations?
Certainly. Within the proposed changes, there is a statement that is being proposed that states the permission granted or implied by a Class 2 home occupation permit shall not be construed as an exemption from any applicable covenants, conditions, restrictions, architectural standards, or other private agreements and obligations. So that is proposed language.
But that doesn't answer the question. All you've done is you put a statement out there that says we're going to be nice and we're not going to override those. How about the person that comes in and they want to override that? My question is, how are you in the planning department going to regulate not to allow that person to do it? There has to be some mechanism here at this level. Otherwise, you're going to pit neighbors against neighbors.
So let me jump in on this. I find this, sir, I actually find your question kind of odd. And the reason I find it kind of odd is let me explain. I live in an HOA that is far more restrictive than the town of Castle Rock. I own a property that is rural, that is 5 acres, that is in an HOA that is more restrictive than that county. So I don't understand why that's a hard question, and I don't understand why, because I live under an HOA that won't let me do things that the town of Castle Rock will let me do. And I understand, I know for a fact, and I'll tell you right now, the penalties, whether imposed by an HOA or imposed by Douglas County, are actually the same. There's no capability to send a zoning violation to jail. And the provision to have it be a criminal proceeding has been removed from the power in this year's legislature. So I guess it's a question to you. Actually, you're here to ask the questions, we're here to talk. But then I would pose it to everyone. Guys, why is that okay that the county should be in that position if it's something that you, as a neighbor, who wish to live in a covenant-controlled area in an HOA and have more strict rules, you have that right now. Why is it okay for the county to be subject to enforcing that as well?
Because you have the resources paid for by us. We don't have a city attorney, a county attorney to go to and ask them to enforce what we say.
Sir, what you just said did not get caught on the microphone, so let me try to restate. Your answer was because the HOA does not have the resources that the county does. The HOA probably doesn't have a dedicated legal staff, doesn't have the inspectors to enforce that. Sir, that's still being done in Douglas County today by HOAs. And it may not be done by yours, but it's done by HOAs. And, sir, Douglas County did not vote on the HOAs or covenants that you live under right now. You and your neighbors did.
If we could... Thank you. So we're going to move on to another phone call, but let me just say I understand your question, and it's something that the county needs to further work on before these resolutions or these ordinances gets passed, because I understand what you're saying. It's a very real concern. Thank you. In just a minute, ma'am, we have a phone call.
All right, let's hear from Dane next. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, it sounds to me like the commission is already leaning towards allowing businesses to operate in areas where people have lived for years and years, in residential communities, agriculture communities. I happen to live in an area where I have over the 10 acres. And you're allowing people to come in and start retail businesses, which is going to impact traffic as well as our quality of life without any concern for the people that are living there. We pay taxes. I happen to live in an area where there are no HOAs, so I depend on the sheriff's department and county inspectors to do their job as far as inspections. And it doesn't sound like there's any proactive inspections that are done, so it depends on people complaining on their neighbors, which a lot of people are very careful about doing and sometimes don't want to do that. But, I mean, whether it's a junkyard popping up next to you or a retail business starting next to you and bringing in the traffic, and that impacts the children and the ability to play. A lot of people still ride horses on some of the outside roads. And it seems to me that there is not enough concern for the quality.
Okay, it looks like, I hope that was a meant ending, an intended ending. Dan, can you help us out here? The statement was made that this change to the zoning regulation will allow retail businesses into these rural residential areas. Can you take that head on for us?
Thank you, Commissioner. I certainly can. The proposed changes do not allow for retail uses. Retail uses are specifically excluded for home occupations within the current regulations, Section 23 of the Douglas County Zoning Resolution. So we certainly are not opening the door for retail sales within these home occupations.
Thank you. And sir, let me just add, when you said it sounds to you like that the commission has made a decision to do this already, I'd like to make it clear that I am opposed to these changes. So when you're speaking about the commission, no decision has been made, but I am opposed. Roger, we have another online call.
We have a question that was submitted by Jim. He asked, will these proposed changes affect any future or existing accessory uses such as an event center?
Which one you would like to handle that? Michael, you want to try to take a stab at that one?
Sure. So event centers actually are not a home occupation. They are a separate, distinct use within the zoning regulations. So these proposed changes will not affect those uses at all.
All right, let's go back to the hearing room. I'd like to hear from someone, only hands up who are opposed and would like to ask a question, please. Well, sir, you're right here. You get it first.
Hi, my name's Scott Anderson, and I live in Surrey Ridge Estates with my wife. Surrey Ridge Estates, if you're not familiar, is an equestrian community. There are many of the people that live in the community own horses. They care for horses, they exercise horses, and they ride horses. They and their children ride horses. Now, every regulation, virtually everything in life has intended consequences and unintended consequences. And I think that what the concerns that you're hearing tonight are concerns related to unintended consequences. And one of those concerns is increased traffic. So, you know, regulations in general, laws and regulations, they basically consist of three things. Things that you can do, things that you must do, and things that you can't do. What these proposed changes do is they open the door with here's what you can do. So that opens up the door. You can have as many as 8 trips a day. You can, for each employee, and you can have as many as whatever, 3 or 4 employees, and it opens up that door. Now, what you can do is, or what you have to do is you have to limit that. And the problem with that is that you're opening the door for all of these concerns, these changes, and in this case, traffic. But for the can't do and the shouldn't do's, you're asking the neighbors to enforce those by pitting neighbors against neighbors. So if I notice, all of a sudden somebody's getting, you know, like there's quite literally in our neighborhood right now, there's very little traffic. It's always local, almost always local, unless it's garbage day or if somebody's having hay delivered or if somebody's having a plumber work on their house. But if you open the door to having employees coming into the neighborhood regularly and leaving and coming and leaving up to 8 times a day, and you're saying, but you can't be more than 8 times a day, but there's no enforcement mechanism for that except pitting neighbors against neighbors, I think that's the concerns you're hearing.
So sir, we got to keep moving along. Thank you, though. You said a couple of very important things that I'd like to have Michael address here, and perhaps Dan. So right now, today, in rural residential zoning, are employees allowed out of a business operating out of a home?
Yes.
Right now?
Right now.
Today?
Yes.
In Surrey Ridge?
Correct.
Right now, today, is there any control over vehicle traffic that business may generate?
The regulations speak to minimal or occasional vehicular traffic, but it's not specific like the proposed regulations with a number of trips associated with it.
Okay, that's a very important point that I made. Well, hang on, sir. We do have some more folks, but sir, I think your concern.
It can't be just you say this, we say this, and you move on. So what I think the concerns that we're expressing are related to. Right now, it's like the door's not open. There's not like a big sign that says, oh, you can have businesses in here, and so let's go. So if you come in here to buy a property, oh, by the way, you can have it. You can do this too. You can have the home and have a business.
But sir, but hang on a second, sir. Sir, you've had plenty of time. I believe you've had more time than anyone.
My thought.
But sir, you've had more time, and the reality is, I'd like to address your thought.
Well, except that you finished it.
But sir, you've had plenty of time. Here's the deal. You were talking about a door being open and unintended consequences. I don't know how we can make it more clear. Employees are allowed, a business is allowed to open right now in rural residential with employees. Right now, that loosey-goosey definition, sorry, Michael, of minimal traffic is undefined. These regulations seek to define that. Well, hey, hang on, sir. I got to get some more folks. The gentleman came in from, you are opposed, sir, and you were heard, I assure you. Do I have anybody who would be in favor of these passing? The young lady in the back here.
I wrote some things down here. So my name is Susan Bertake. I own the Kilwins in Parker. So I'm a small business owner, and I'm very familiar with the small business community. I don't own and operate a business in unincorporated Douglas County, but I am familiar with the people that do. And these are my neighbors, and these are my friends. These are people that I go to church with, and these are people whose, my children, these are their parents. This is my carpet cleaner. This is my HVAC service. This is my sprinkler service. I have a neighbor that owns a hydro seed company. These people contribute to our tax base. If you make all of these people go away because they can't live and perform their trade and what they're skilled to do, they will move away. They will move out of this county. And I don't know if you understand how much these people contribute to our tax base here and how much taxes they pay to our community. So I heard a couple of tax-related questions. These folks are our neighbors, and they pay taxes to keep our community the second richest community in the United States. Did you guys know that? I mean, these are the people that are contributing to that. I can't imagine these contributing members of our community being sued and having to leave their homes to go God knows where because you're not supporting them. These are tradesmen. These are people that put food on their plates. They put food on their families' plates because they're providing services to you. They're providing services to you.
Okay. Okay. Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate that statement. Commissioner Thomas, take it away.
I think this is a good time to go to an online question that you have, Roger.
We do. Sherilyn submitted this question on Facebook. Is there some way to clarify that the new zoning proposal puts limits on traffic and does not increase it? Or am I misunderstanding this? I'm not sure why people who are against the proposal are not understanding that it will limit the size of trucks and the number of trips. As it currently stands, there are no limits on those. Or am I wrong?
That is correct. Under the current regulations, it is not specific. Under the proposed regulations, there would be a weight limit, and there is a maximum amount of trips per day.
So what if your roads aren't designed to carry these trips? What if you live on a dirt road? What if you live on 10 acres and you've lived there for 40 years? And all of a sudden your neighbor has 15 trucks down the street. And my horses aren't safe, my dogs aren't safe.
Okay, so hang on, guys. We need to... I appreciate it. Ma'am, you will be given the opportunity to ask that question again. We're going to try, as long as time allows. But we need to make sure everybody's on microphone so that the folks that are joining online can also hear the question. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes, we have a question here for Dan. Dan, what are some of the major neighborhoods that would be impacted if the county commission decides to approve these changes?
Thank you, Commissioner. The major neighborhoods, we have quite a few rural residential neighborhoods throughout the county. Surrey Ridge folks are here tonight. That would be one of the communities that could be impacted, amongst many others. Windy Hills is another example of a community here. So rural residential, large rural residential, and agricultural one zone districts, any of those communities would be impacted that are above 4.5 acres.
Okay, folks, before we come back to questions from the audience, and ma'am, yes, I see you right there, and I'm keeping an eye on you. Let's go to our final polling question. Roger.
Thank you, Commissioner. Here it is. Again, just use your telephone keypad. To enter the number of your response from strongly agree to strongly disagree, if you would like to operate a business out of your home, do the proposed changes discussed tonight address your hurdles? Press 1 for strongly agree. Press 2 for agree, press 3 for neutral, press 4 for disagree, and press 5 for strongly agree. Strongly disagree, I'm sorry, 5 for strongly disagree.
Okay, well, thank you, Roger. We have, for those of you joining us on the phone, press *3 if you have a question, and those of you joining us online, we do want to take another question here in the hearing room. Ma'am, go ahead. You asked a question before. I don't think we had you on microphone, but please go ahead and ask again.
Okay, my name's Leslie Parker. I live down Wolfensberger Road. We've owned the property for over 35 years. My horses are no longer safe. My dog's not safe. My cat's not safe. And I truly support tradesmen. However, I think there should be a limit as to what is going on down my dirt road. The neighbors across the street, they built a building 30 feet high, which blocks our view. How high? 35. And it's massive. And I have virtually no idea how that got through the planning department. But I'm just here.
That part might be another meeting.
I know, but I'm just here to try to protect how we live. Bottom line, how we live. And what our property rights are.
Understood. Very good. And again, I mean, I could turn it back over to Dan and Michael, but this is an effort to define acceptable number of trips per day that is undefined right now, guys. It's undefined. You're counting on a member of Michael's team to go out and look at traffic that you're looking at right now, and you're saying that's too much. You're counting on them to say, yeah, I agree with you, ma'am, or no, ma'am, that's actually not excessive. But hey, sorry, ma'am, we have a phone question we got to get to. Roger?
All right, let's hear from Diana next. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Diana.
So I was wondering, I I mean, honestly, how are you guys enforcing any of this, and what is your date of planning? And when any of this will be enforced?
So the question was, and ma'am, correct me if I get this wrong, I believe you're still on the line. What is the enforcement for what we are planning? How do we intend to enforce it? And Michael, that's the job we're going to give you, sir.
Sure. Once again, we work on a complaint basis, and we respond to the complaints that we receive from neighbors. We don't drive around patrolling from property to property. We've got 3 zoning compliance officials for the entire Douglas County. We would have to have an army of people.
Okay. We, folks, I see a whole lot of hands up, and believe me, Commissioner Thomas and I will be happy to stay afterwards to discuss this with you, but Mickey's big hand on the clock is telling us that it's time for us to start wrapping up this evening. You know, actually, sir, I appreciate you mentioning that. Run a business in a house you rent. Let's go ahead and thank you, sir. We need to wrap it up. So let's go ahead and please stay after. Be happy to address that with you. So, boy, this is a little different than when we had the sheriff and the DA and for the fentanyl discussion. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I'm sure we had a caller mention it, and I'm sure many of you understand, yes, I am an advocate for this change. You've heard me explain my position. I have heard from people who have advocated for these changes, and then we did extensive work on the Board of County Commissioners in order to limit the scope and make sure that these changes were defined. So I am an advocate for it. I'm happy to speak to anyone about why I still believe this is a good idea. Thank you for coming in this evening to join us in this important conversation. It's topics like this that, folks, we got to talk about. We have to have these conversations, and we have to be the kind of community that does talk about these concerns, does listen to the concerns from folks who see problems and unintended consequences in a change. But at the same token, when we have residents who come forward and they feel that their livelihood is being threatened by an existing regulation, and it's a ticking time bomb waiting to land on top of them, which has happened here in this last year. Folks, that's something I take very serious. And as your elected representative charged with ensuring these regulations are enforced, I'm always mindful that we must have the correct regulations for our population. Again, thank you everyone who joined us on the phone. Thank you everybody monitoring online, and more specifically, thank you everyone for joining us in the room this evening. I'll be sticking around to answer additional questions and tell you what I think afterwards. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, Commissioner Teal. I'd like to thank everyone in the room for your patience. I know there were a lot of questions in the audience that we didn't get answered. I'll be staying until we've had a chance to talk to everyone that wants to talk to us. Let me just tell you that I said a little bit about this earlier, that property rights cut both ways. On one hand, people feel that they can do whatever they want with their property. On the other hand, people bought property in neighborhoods with existing zoning in place. And when they invested in that property, that was their expectation of what they could expect to be done by the neighbors around them. And I think that is something that we need to keep very close tabs on and respect. I bought a house in Highlands Ranch. I knew what that zoning was. I didn't want my neighbors running a hair salon next to my house with cars in and out all day long. That's why I bought in Highlands Ranch. And so these are discussions that we need to have, but know that I do not want to change what was in place when many people bought their homes, and that was the expectation they have of what was going to be there. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being engaged, and I will be here tonight to visit with all of you. So thank you for your time and attention.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. On behalf of Douglas County, thank you for joining us this evening. If we didn't get to your question tonight, and I know we missed a lot of questions, We invite you to submit any questions you may have about this or other topics at douglas.co.us/Citizen Connect. I've also been told that we will be compiling questions that we did not get to and provide answers on the website in a few days. So again, we know we didn't get to a lot of questions, and we'll be trying to address those here in the next few days. We hope you will join us again for a future town hall, and we wish you a very good evening.